Alex Harper, a hard-working farmer, stepped onto his porch with his morning coffee. The familiar sight of his wheat field, however, was gone. In its place stood a lavish European-style garden, complete with a fish pond, gleaming white fences, and stone swan statues. Standing in the middle of this unauthorized transformation was Tricia Kensington, the HOA president. Arms crossed, she surveyed the garden as if it were her personal kingdom. "Tricia, what are you doing on my land?" Alex demanded, his voice trembling with shock. She replied with smug satisfaction, "I'm simply beautifying the area. You should be thanking me." Alex stared at his destroyed field, his jaw clenched tight. "If you think you can do whatever you want on my property," he said coldly, "you're about to pay a very steep price." Alex Harper wasn't just any farmer. He was a third-generation steward of the land, a man whose calloused hands told stories of dawn to dusk dedication. His 50-acre property had been in the Harper family since his grandfather purchased it in 1947, long before developers had even dreamed of building Meadowbrook Estates next door. Every morning for the past 15 years, Alex had risen with the sun, tended his crops with meticulous care, and found profound satisfaction in watching his wheat fields dance in the breeze. The land wasn't merely his livelihood. It was his heritage, his sanctuary, his future. That peaceful existence began to unravel 3 years ago when Meadowbrook Estates broke ground. The development company had promised a harmonious integration with the existing rural landscape. What they delivered instead was a collection of cookie-cutter McMansions and a particularly aggressive homeowners association headed by Tricia Kensington. Tricia, a former corporate executive who'd retired early after a lucrative career in pharmaceuticals, approached HOA leadership like a military campaign. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair, perpetual tennis attire, and Mercedes SUV became symbols of dread throughout the neighborhood. Under her reign, mailbox colors were strictly regulated. Holiday decorations were timed to the minute, and lawn infractions resulted in immediate fines. "She's been gunning for my property since day one," Alex explained to his brother on the phone, pacing furiously across his kitchen floor. First, it was complaints about tractor noise. Then, it was the unsightly grain silo. Now, she's literally stolen my land. The previous week, Alex had received a letter, not a request, but a notification that the HOA had voted to extend community beautification efforts to the eyesore areas bordering our prestigious development. The letter, signed with Tricia's flourishing signature, made no acknowledgement that the eyesore areas were, in fact, private property with crops already planted. "I called her immediately," Alex continued, his voice rising. "She told me that my agricultural activities were decreasing property values by 15%, and that the HOA had every right to mitigate negative aesthetic impacts. When I mentioned property lines and trespassing laws, she actually laughed at me. James. She laughed. What Alex didn't know then was that Tricia had already hired a landscaping company. While he spent the weekend visiting his daughter at college, Tricia's team moved in. They destroyed 2 acres of young wheat, installed irrigation systems connected to the HOA's water supply, planted ornamental shrubs, erected decorative fencing, and even installed stone statuary, all without permission, all without permits. The worst part, Alex told his neighbor Bill, who had stopped by after witnessing the confrontation, is that she genuinely believes she's done me a favor. She said the garden enhancement would increase my property value, and that I should be grateful. Bill shook his head in disbelief. She pulled the same stunt with the Johnsons last year, tried to force them to remove their vegetable garden because it wasn't aesthetically consistent with neighborhood standards. But this is a whole new level of entitlement. Alex slumped into his kitchen chair, running his hands through his graying hair. The financial loss was significant. That wheat would have yielded several $1,000s at harvest. But the violation felt deeper, more personal. His grandfather had survived the Dust Bowl on this land. His father had refused lucrative development offers to preserve the family legacy. And now, some HOA president with delusions of grandeur had decided his heritage was an eyesore. "She doesn't understand what she's done," Alex said quietly. "This isn't just about property rights or money. This is about respect. This is about recognizing that not everything in this world exists to please her aesthetic sensibilities." Bill nodded sympathetically. "So what are you going to do?" Alex stood up, a determined look hardening his features. "First, I'm calling my lawyer. Then I'm calling the sheriff. And after that," he paused, looking out the window at Tricia, who was now directing workers to install solar-powered landscape lighting. "After that, I'm going to teach Tricia Kensington what happens when you mess with a farmer's land." Little did Tricia know, Alex Harper wasn't just any farmer. He was a man who understood patience, strategy, and the inexorable power of natural consequences. And he was about to demonstrate all three. The morning after their confrontation, Alex Harper sat across from Linda Ramirez, his attorney of 15 years, spreading documents across her mahogany desk. "So let me get this straight," Linda said, adjusting her reading glasses. "The HOA president transformed 2 acres of your wheat field into an ornamental garden without permission. And now she's refusing to restore your property?" Alex nodded grimly. "I delivered a formal letter requesting they remove everything and compensate me for crop damage." Tricia sent back this. He slid a cream-colored envelope toward Linda. The attorney removed a letter emblazoned with the Meadowbrook Estates logo. Her eyebrows rose progressively higher as she read. "This is remarkable," she finally said. "She claims that Article 7, Section 12 of the HOA Covenant grants them authority over any property visually contiguous to the neighborhood aesthetic sphere. That's not even legal terminology." "Keep reading," Alex said, his jaw tightening. Linda continued. "As your property falls within the viewshed of our community and impacts property values accordingly, it is subject to community standards of appearance and maintenance." "This is absurd. Your farm predates their development by decades. She's invented her own jurisdiction," Alex replied. "I've researched their actual HOA documents. They have no authority beyond their property lines." But Tricia's convinced the board otherwise. 2 days later, Alex found another envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a notice of violation with a $750 fine for failure to maintain landscaping to community standards and unauthorized removal of HOA-approved beautification elements. The violation referred to Alex's attempt to salvage some of his wheat crop from the undisturbed portions of his field. "She's fining me for farming my own land," Alex told his daughter Emma during their weekly video call. Emma, studying agricultural law at State University, looked outraged. "Dad, this is textbook overreach. The HOA has zero authority over your property. You need to fight this." "I'm trying," Alex sighed. "But Tricia's turned this into a PR campaign. She's telling everyone I'm the unreasonable one, the stubborn farmer who won't progress with the times." The neighborhood had indeed become divided. Several residents, particularly those whose homes didn't directly face the HOA's rigid scrutiny, quietly supported Alex. Bill Henderson and the Johnsons had even helped him document the damage. Others, however, particularly those serving on committees under Tricia's leadership, had adopted her perspective that Alex was diminishing their investment with his unsightly agricultural activities. "She's hosting a neighborhood barbecue this weekend," reported Diane Johnson, bringing Alex a homemade apple pie as a gesture of solidarity. The invitation specifically mentions discussing community beautification challenges at our borders. "Everyone knows she's talking about you." Alex thanked Diane for the information, but his heart sank. Tricia was mobilizing public opinion against him, painting herself as the neighborhood champion while portraying him as an obstacle to community improvement. The situation deteriorated further the following Tuesday. Alex returned from delivering produce to the local farmer's market to find a county inspection vehicle parked in his driveway. The inspector, looking uncomfortable, explained that they'd received multiple complaints about hazardous waste and environmental violations. "Complaints?" Alex asked, bewildered. "From whom?" "Several residents of Meadowbrook Estates," the inspector replied, checking his clipboard. A Miss S. Kensington submitted the initial report with photographs. Alex felt a chill, despite the warm spring day. Photographs of what, exactly? The inspector showed him images of old tires, broken appliances, and what appeared to be household trash scattered across the eastern edge of Alex's property, precisely where it was visible from Meadowbrook Estates. "This isn't mine," Alex said firmly. "Someone dumped this here. I keep my farm clean." The inspector seemed inclined to believe him, but explained that Alex would still need to clean it up and submit to a follow-up inspection. As the county vehicle pulled away, Alex stood staring at the debris field in disbelief. This was no random dumping. The trash had been carefully arranged for maximum visibility from the development. That evening, Alex installed 4 high-definition security cameras overlooking his property line with Meadowbrook Estates. The investment strained his budget, but Linda had advised documenting everything. 3 nights later, at 2:17 a.m., the cameras captured exactly what Alex had suspected: a pickup truck with headlights off, creeping along the property line. 3 figures emerged, one unmistakably Gerald Kensington, Tricia's husband, accompanied by 2 men Alex recognized from HOA board meetings. They unloaded several bags of trash, an old computer monitor, and what appeared to be broken garden furniture, arranging it all in a highly visible pattern before quickly departing. The next morning, as Alex was reviewing the footage, he received a text message from Bill. "Emergency HOA meeting called for 5 p.m. today. Topic: addressing the growing environmental hazard at our community border." Alex's hands shook with anger as he called Linda. "They're framing me," he said. "They're deliberately trashing my property to build a case against me." "This changes everything," Linda replied. "What they've done isn't just HOA overreach anymore. It's criminal trespassing, vandalism, illegal dumping, and potentially fraud. Forward me that footage immediately." By noon, Alex had compiled all the video evidence and documentation of the original garden installation. Linda advised him to attend the emergency meeting, but say nothing. She would handle the rest. At 4:55 p.m., Alex parked his truck outside the Meadowbrook Estates clubhouse. Inside, he found nearly 40 residents seated in rows, with Tricia standing at a podium, a PowerPoint presentation queued up behind her showing close-ups of the trash on Alex's property. "As you can see," Tricia was saying as Alex quietly took a seat in the back row, "the situation has become untenable. What began as an eyesore has evolved into an environmental hazard that threatens our property values and potentially our health. Several residents nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable, glancing at Alex with expressions ranging from hostility to sympathy. Therefore, Tricia continued, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to getting her way, the board proposes to invoke Section 21 of our covenant, allowing for legal action against neighboring properties that constitute a public nuisance. Alex remained silent, his weathered hands clasped tightly in his lap. Tricia hadn't noticed him yet, too caught up in her performance. As she clicked to the next slide, a mock-up showing Alex's entire property transformed into an extension of their manicured community. Space, he felt, a strange calm settle over him. The evidence was secure, his attorney was preparing legal action, and Tricia Kensington, in her relentless pursuit of control, had finally overplayed her hand. What she didn't realize was that farmers understood patience better than most. They knew that sometimes you had to wait for exactly the right moment to harvest what you'd sown. And for Tricia Kensington, that moment of reckoning was coming far sooner than she expected. The morning after the emergency HOA meeting, Alex Harper sat at his kitchen table with Emma, who had driven home from university to support her father. Together, they crafted a carefully worded email to the Meadowbrook Estates residents. "Keep it factual, Dad," Emma advised, her fingers hovering over the laptop keyboard. "Let the evidence speak for itself." The email was simple but devastating. "Dear neighbors, I believe you deserve to know what's really happening at the border of our properties." Attached were 4 video clips, each clearly timestamped, showing Gerald Kensington and 2 HOA board members, Robert Finch and Thomas Weldon, dumping trash on Alex's property in the dead of night. "Should we include the legal notice from Linda?" Emma asked. Alex nodded. "People need to understand this isn't just neighbor drama, it's criminal activity." The final attachment was a formal letter from Linda Ramirez, outlining the numerous laws broken: trespassing, vandalism, illegal dumping, defamation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The letter concluded with a statement that Alex had filed reports with both the county sheriff and Environmental Protection Agency. By noon, Alex's phone was buzzing constantly with text messages and calls from shocked neighbors. "I had no idea they were doing this," said Margaret Wilson, an elderly resident who had lived in Meadowbrook since its inception. "Tricia told us you were neglecting your property deliberately to spite us." Bill Henderson organized an impromptu gathering at his home that evening, where 15 residents, nearly a third of the development, came to express their support for Alex and their disgust with the HOA leadership's actions. "Tricia's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow," reported Jennifer Lawson, who worked as the HOA's secretary. "She's furious about the email. Says you've violated community standards by creating discord." Alex couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Creating discord? By showing video of her husband committing crimes? Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "There's more, Alex. She's been working on something big behind the scenes. I've been processing paperwork for weeks, but I didn't understand what it was for until now." The next morning, Linda called Alex at 7:30 a.m., her voice tense. "The county planning office just received an application to rezone your eastern acreage as community green space. The application includes signatures from supposedly 80% of Meadowbrook residents supporting the measure." Alex felt his blood pressure spike. "That's impossible. I own that land free and clear." "They're attempting an eminent domain argument," Linda explained, claiming that converting your unused agricultural land would serve a greater public good by providing recreational space for the growing community. "Unused?" Alex sputtered. "I've been growing crops there for 15 years. "I know," Linda said calmly. and we'll fight it. But Alex, the application includes documentation claiming your property has been abandoned for agricultural purposes. With photographs of the trash they dumped themselves as evidence. Alex paced his kitchen, struggling to comprehend the audacity. How did they get 80% of residents to agree to this? That's what we need to verify, Linda replied. I've requested copies of all signed documents through official channels. Alex didn't wait. He called Bill immediately, who confirmed what he suspected. I never signed anything about rezoning your land. Neither did any of the neighbors I've spoken with. By mid-afternoon, Jennifer had secretly provided Alex with copies of the signature pages. What they revealed was shocking dozens of signatures that looked suspiciously similar, with subtle variations to disguise the forgery. Some residents listed had moved away months ago. Others had been on extended vacations when the documents were supposedly signed. This is signature fraud, declared Marcus Chen, a retired forensic accountant who lived at the end of Magnolia Lane. I'd testify to that in court. These signatures were clearly created by the same person attempting to disguise their handwriting. At 6:00 p.m., the emergency HOA board meeting convened in the clubhouse. Tricia, impeccably dressed in a navy blazer and pearls, called the meeting to order with practiced authority. She appeared momentarily startled when Alex walked in, accompanied by Linda, Emma, and no fewer than 25 Meadowbrook residents. This is a closed board meeting, Tricia announced, her voice sharp. Only board members may attend. Actually, Jennifer interjected, consulting the HOA bylaws. Emergency sessions may be observed by any member in good standing, though only board members may vote. Tricia's smile tightened. Very well. Our first agenda item concerns Mr. Harper's disruptive communication. Point of order, interrupted Thomas Weldon, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Given recent developments, I believe we should address the allegations against board members first. Tricia's eyes flashed dangerously. Those allegations are baseless and defamatory. Mr. Harper is clearly attempting to distract from his property violations. We have video evidence, Mrs. Kensington, Linda stated calmly, rising from her seat, of your husband and 2 board members committing multiple criminal acts. Would you like me to play it for everyone here? The room fell silent. Robert Finch, one of the men in the video, stared at the table. Thomas Weldon cleared his throat. I wish to resign from the board, effective immediately, he announced. And I want to apologize to Mr. Harper. I was told we were just creating evidence for a community improvement project. I didn't understand the full implications. Tricia's composure cracked. Thomas, we discussed this. I've also contacted the county planning office, Linda continued, her voice cutting through Tricia's protest. They're very interested in the rezoning application, submitted with apparently forged signatures. Forgery of official documents is a felony offense in this state. The color drained from Tricia's face. Those signatures were collected legitimately. You personally forged them, said Margaret Wilson, standing shakily with her cane. That's not my signature on page 3. I've had the same signature for 78 years, young lady. I know what it looks like. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room as other residents recognized their supposedly collected signatures. This meeting is adjourned, Tricia declared, gathering her papers hastily. Actually, said Jennifer, according to bylaws, only a majority board vote can adjourn an emergency session. She looked around at the remaining board members, who were notably avoiding Tricia's gaze. What followed was the most extraordinary 2 hours in Meadowbrook Estates history. One by one, residents stood to speak about Tricia's reign of intimidation excessive fines for minor infractions, selective enforcement of rules, personal vendettas disguised as community standards. Gerald Kensington arrived halfway through, summoned by his wife's increasingly desperate text messages. He took one look at the assembled crowd and the laptop displaying freeze frames of him dumping trash, then turned to Tricia. "You told me this was approved by the county as part of the rezoning plan," he said, his voice hollow. "You said Harper had already agreed to sell." "Gerald, not now," Tricia hissed. "Yes, now," he replied, his face ashen. "I'm not going to jail for this, Tricia. 23 years of marriage and you've never once admitted you were wrong about anything. But this time, you've gone too far." He turned to Alex. "Mr. Harper, the first owe you an apology and restitution. I'll be contacting your attorney tomorrow to make arrangements." By meeting's end, the board had voted to remove Tricia as president, initiate an independent audit of all HOA finances and activities under her leadership, withdraw the rezoning application, and issue a formal apology to Alex Harper for all damages to his property. As people filed out, Alex remained seated, watching Tricia gather her belongings with trembling hands. For a moment, their eyes met across the emptying room. He expected anger, perhaps threats of retaliation. Instead, he saw something unexpected, the momentary crack in her facade revealing not a monster, but a deeply insecure person whose entire identity had crumbled in a single evening. Alex nodded once, then turned away. His grandfather had taught him long ago that good farmers don't gloat when the harvest comes in. They simply gather what they've sown and prepare for the next season. The fallout from the emergency meeting was swift and comprehensive. Within 48 hours, Tricia Kensington found herself stripped of all authority she had so carefully accumulated over the years. The interim HOA board, now led by Bill Henderson, issued a formal community-wide apology to Alex and initiated a thorough investigation into all financial decisions made during Tricia's tenure. "We've discovered irregularities in the landscaping contracts," Jennifer informed Alex over coffee at his kitchen table 1 week later. "Apparently, the company that installed your community garden is owned by Tricia's brother-in-law. They've been charging premium rates for years." Legal consequences mounted quickly. The county prosecutor's office opened an investigation into document forgery and fraud. 3 separate homeowners filed civil suits against Tricia for harassment and selective enforcement of HOA rules. Gerald Kensington, true to his word, settled with Alex privately, covering all damages to his property and providing a written affidavit detailing Tricia's orchestration of the entire scheme. "I should have stood up to her years ago," Gerald confessed during the settlement meeting. "She always had to control everything, always had to be right. I'm filing for divorce next week." Meadowbrook Estates underwent a remarkable transformation over the following months. The special election for a permanent HOA board brought in a diverse group of residents committed to rebuilding community trust. Their first official act was to rewrite the HOA charter, significantly limiting board powers and establishing clear appeals processes for all decisions. "We want to be good neighbors, not dictators," Bill announced at his first meeting as elected president. "This community should enhance our lives, not control them." Alex's wheat field returned to its natural state by late summer, golden stalks swaying in the breeze where Tricia's unauthorized garden had once stood. He found himself invited to neighborhood gatherings now, no longer the outsider but a respected adjacent property owner. The final chapter of the saga came unexpectedly that autumn. Alex received a call from his bank about a foreclosure opportunity on a 10-acre parcel, directly behind Meadowbrook Estate, specifically behind Tricia's house. "It's good grazing land," noted his friend Mike Sullivan, a cattle rancher who had been looking to expand. I could run about 20 head there comfortably. Alex smiled slowly. You know whose backyard that borders, right? Mike chuckled. I heard she's trying to sell her house already. This might accelerate her timeline. The deal closed quietly. By November 20, Angus cattle grazed contentedly on the land behind Trish's once pristine backyard. The prevailing winds, which Alex had studied carefully for 15 years of crop management, carried the unmistakable aroma of cattle directly over her property most days. Trish's house sold at a significant loss in December. The moving truck departed on a crisp winter morning, with not a single neighbor coming to say goodbye. As her car pulled away for the last time, Alex stood at the edge of his property, leaning on the fence post that had once marked the boundary of her unauthorized expansion. He wasn't there to gloat. Farmers understood better than most that life had its own way of balancing accounts. He was simply there to close the chapter, to feel the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, with patience and principle, justice found its way home. The cattle lowed softly in the distance as Alex turned back toward his fields, ready at last to focus on the season ahead, untroubled by the shadow that had briefly fallen across his land. 5 years later, Meadowbrook Estates has become a model community where neighbors truly support each other. Alex's farm thrives alongside the development, with many residents now participating in his seasonal farmers market. What about you, dear readers? Has this saga resonated with your own experiences? Have you encountered your own Trisha, or battled an overzealous HOA, determined to control every aspect of your property? If so, show your solidarity by commenting "No HOA" below. Your stories matter, and this community understands the frustration of dealing with entitled neighbors who overstep their boundaries. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to catch more compelling neighborhood dramas and satisfying revenge stories. Share your own HOA nightmare in the comments. I respond to every single one.